My name is Jennifer Tebb. I was born in Richmond at Epworth Hospital on the 11th of December 1944. We were living in Northcote, then we moved to Ocean Grove when I was very little. My father and his brother built a house there and I started school there. I went to school in the Bubs, and in grade 1, I think Dad went over he was an army man, he was in the Second World War, and he went over to Korea. And we moved back to Northcote to live with my grandmother. And Dad was overseas for a few years. I went to Westgarth School at Northcote. And then when I was about in grade 3 or 4, 3 I'd say, Dad came back from Korea and he told Mum he wanted a divorce. And Mum was really, really upset, and she ended up having a nervous breakdown and she went into hospital. And she was in hospital for about 12 months. She had shock treatment and quite a lot of treatment which I didn't know about until later on in years. My grandmother looked after me and my brother, who was 5 years younger than me. And then my grandmother, my mum's mum, Isa, was a pretty social sort of a lady. And I think having 2 kids to look after kind of was a bit hard for her. So every weekend, she'd put me and my brother in a taxi from Northcote, and we'd go all the way to Mordialloc to stop with my auntie, who lived in White Street. And she'd mind us for the weekend. Then we'd get a taxi back to Northcote. Now, we were only young. I was probably in grade 4 at this stage, grade 5. And we were only young, and my brother wasn't even at school. And we came all the way back to Northcote in a taxi. So I went to school there. Bill he went to Mordialloc Primary and I went to Mordialloc High School eventually. No, I went to Parkdale Primary and then I went to Mordialloc High School. And I stayed there for 2 years. I wanted to leave. I wanted to do hairdressing. Mum couldn't afford to keep me at school really. So I left when I turned 14. I didn't get a job as a hairdresser. I got a job in a cafe in Chelsea. And I worked there for about 6 months, but I didn't like the owner. He was real bossy and he made me take the pie sign out the front and all of these things, made me go and get his dry cleaning. So I thought, I'm going to leave here. So I got a job at the shoe factory at Mordialloc. And I don't know how long I stayed there, but I stayed there a while because the shoe factory, I left, got another job. I wanted to do office work. So I went and got a job in an office in Princess Laundry in Mentone. And I worked there. Then I got sick of that, so I went back to the shoe factory. And then I stayed there again for a while. Then I got sick of that. And then I started on a long road of all thousands of jobs. There's just too many. Some I'd last a week, some I'd last a day, some I'd last till morning tea time and walk out. If I went around and got all my pay that was owing from all these jobs, I'd be a rich lady. But I'd just walk out, that'd be it. And then in those days there was plenty of jobs. So if I'd get home from work, Mum would say, how did your job go? How did your new job go? And I'd say, oh, I left there. I'm working at such and such. So that's what I did. I was a bit of a wild teenager and I got up to a bit of mischief. And I used to be friendly with a few girls who I'm still friendly with all these years later. But the first one was Judy, who I met the first time at the shoe factory when I was 14 and a half. And as it turned out, we lost touch, and then Judy ended up being the old people who lived across the road from Andrew and Alicia, as they told us, the nice old couple. Well, that was Judy and her husband Len. She married the boy she went out with all her life. Then I got married to Bobby Cunningham in Dingley in 1965. We already had Deborah Ann, and then we had Karen Elizabeth. And Elizabeth was named after his sister who died at 19. She was a twin to Donnie. She died of polio when there was a polio epidemic, so Elizabeth was named after her. And we lived with Vera and Ted, his mother and father, in Armidale for a while, and then we moved to a flat in Nepean Highway in Aspendale, sorry. And then he had an accident. He was in an accident. Another man was driving. They'd been for a golf day, and the guy who was driving got a broken leg, but Bob was thrown out, so he was unconscious for 5 months to the day of the accident, and then he passed away. So the kids were still very little. Karen was 10 months old when he passed away, and Debbie was two and a half, not quite, no, 2 and a few months. So we went back and lived with Vera and Ted, and they were very, very supportive, and, you know, helped with the children and helped me. They were very, very good. And then I went to stay with my friends Brenda. They lived in Oakley, Brenda and Graham. And Graham had a few guys up from the pub for a card night. And I was staying there with the kids, with the girls. And Gordon was there. And the first thing I remember about Gordon is that he had a gap in his teeth, and he had the cigarette stuck in the gap in his teeth. And he was betting big on those cards. Then, once again, I got pregnant, and I moved into Gordon's house in Oakley. And unfortunately, I went right through the pregnancy, but I had to finish the baby. Little girl was stillborn. So she would have been 51. Yeah, 51 this year. So anyway, we went on, and then Vera and Ted came and lived with us for a while at Oakley, because I did my nursing aid training, and it was all different shifts, and the girls were still only young. They were at school, but they were only young. So Vera and Ted came and lived with us for it was a 12-month course, so they stayed with us to help look after the kids, you know, to be there when they got home from school and everything. And then after, then they moved on. I think they went and stopped at June's. And then I finished my training, and Gordon wanted to go and live in the country. He wanted to be a farmer.
Was that successful? No.
So we ended up going down to Terang, because it was kind of within distance of my dad. He lives at Mortlake, which is about a 20-minute run across from Terang. So not that I'd had a lot to do with my dad, but I thought, oh, well, he's there if we were desperate. Not that he was much help, but still. So Gordon was supposed to get a transfer with his job from Clayton to Warrnambool, because it was the same firm. But he had his long service, so he took his long service when we moved, and then by the time he was ready to start at the job, there was a job shortage, not a depression, there was just no work. And so they couldn't put him on. So he was stuck down there with no work, no nothing on this block of land. I hated it. But he ended up getting a job at the butter factory, so at least we had some money coming in. But we had that many visitors when we lived down there. It was unbelievable. They were coming out of the woodwork, and they come down and stay for the weekend, and we had hardly any money, did we? And you'd be waving goodbye to some people, and I'd be changing the sheets on the bed, and another lot had come down. So anyway, we managed to get through. I don't know how. But then I said, oh, this is no good. We're not getting anywhere. So we'd sold the house and we bought another, I wanted to come back to the city, but Gordon didn't want to come back. So we had some land across the road. So we decided to get a house shifted and put on that. Well, it was an old house. There was only old houses getting shifted in those days. So it was an old house, and then we had to spend money to get it up. So we'd kind of gone through the money that we got for the house because there was a mortgage on the house. Yeah, so then we decided we'd move back. We were just going backwards. So I said, well, we've got to move this year because Debbie will be starting high school and Karen will be nearly there. She'll have one year at primary. And I said, we've got to get a place that's near a high school and near a primary school. So we ended up moving to Lower Danny Road. And Debbie went to Parkdale High and Karen went to Parktone Primary. So we stayed in that unit for a while because the house we just left the house. We gave it to an agent and it just didn't sell, did it, for a long time. And then I got a job and Gordon was working, things were going all right. And then I found out that, I did have something to prevent it, but it didn't work. I was pregnant with Andrew. So I kept working and I said, we better see if we can scrape enough to get a house. But the thing was, when I was in hospital, the agent rang and said that he had a buyer, but I can't remember how much it was for, but it was very, very low. But we'd waited for so long, we thought we might as well sell it and be finished with it. So we sold it, and then we had to go down because we'd left a lot of stuff down there because we were in a house and we'd moved to a unit up here. So we had to go down and get the furniture and what have you. So I remember I'd had Andrew, and Vera had come down and stopped to look after him because we'd left early in the morning, Gordon and me, to go down to Terang. It was a very, very hot day in February, very, very hot. And there was no air conditioning, and it was in his old work truck, which was rattling and you just bounced up and down the whole way. And I had a migraine and I thought, oh, I'm going to be sick. I thought, I can't do this. Anyway, we finally got there and there was all this stuff, all these clothes which we hadn't worn and all other stuff. And I thought, oh, well, we loaded up the truck as best we could. And then all this other stuff, I said, oh, just throw it under the house because it was up high. So we threw all the stuff under the house. We thought it won't matter, no one will see it. Anyway, a while later, Bill, my brother, was telling me about his friend, his brother and his wife had bought this house in Terang, and he'd never been to our house, so he didn't know whereabouts it was. And I said, oh, whereabouts was the house they bought? And he said, oh, just through the railway line, down at a crossing. You go through a crossing and it's a railway line. And he explained it to me, and I realised that his friend from Carnegie had got all that way and bought our house with all that rubbish underneath it, which was incredible. It'd be like winning Tats Lotto. So that was it at Terang. Anyway, I was glad to get out of there. I didn't like the people. I didn't like anything about it. Oh, I liked you and the kids. And the kids, of course. I liked some of the animals. We had quite a few animals. The kids liked it. The girls loved it, I think. They loved all the animals, and so that was good. So then we just moved to White Street, and that was it. That New Year's Eve, we decided to have a New Year's Eve party, and we made it a fancy dress, and we asked the boys next door. We said, if you're not doing anything, you know, you're quite welcome to come in. So they all came in and they all dressed up, or you did with your clown's feet. And everyone that came dressed up. It was really a good night. And Debbie was talking to the boy with the clown's feet, that's you, Andrew. And Sharon was talking to Rob. I don't think anyone was talking to Ian. Then that's it, then everyone disappeared. Christmas barbecue, yeah, we always had barbecue breakfast, and so I asked the boys if they wanted to come in, and Debbie was trying to put on a bit of a show to show what a good little housewife she was, I think. Anyway, I said, all right, she said, I'll cook it. So I said, I will put the eggs on. So she put the eggs on the grill part, and they just fell through. And then I think Debbie went and met Andrew's parents, your parents, down at Dramana, and then she was eating, and then she spilt all the food down the front of her. And then even at her wedding, she spilt the soup on her wedding dress, on her lovely wedding dress. Oh, we've been very lucky with our 3 children. They're all got good partners, they've all got lovely kids, and they're all happy. They've probably all had their moments, which we don't know about, but then we all have. Karen was working at Southland in a little cafe, and Julio took a fancy to her, I think, and he'd not long been out from Argentina, so his English wasn't the best, and the guys in the plastering had sent him up the shop to ask for silly things, you know, like a bottle of milk with sauce or something, or a pie with something or other, pie with sugar. And anyway, I think Karen and the other lady that worked in the shop, they felt sorry for him because he'd come up. But he said he used to just go up to see Karen. And then I think she started taking advantage of him. If he'd come up, she'd say, oh, will you go and pick up my dry cleaning? Or so he'd run off and do that. I think they met at school. So they were kind of just friends, and then I think, you know, they were in a group, and then that was it. You know, they went out and then they had a couple of split ups, and then they got back together, and Bob's your uncle. Yeah. Well, that was through Debbie and Karen, because when I was still living at Armidale, I used to go down, and Mum was working, and I used to go down, and Bill was still living with her. That was in McDonald Street, in a little flat. And I used to take the girls down every Saturday, and I'd say, come on, we're going to see Nanny and Bill. And they'd say, we're going to see Nanny Bill, because they didn't put the and in. And it just went from there. Everyone called her Nana Bill. Even our friends called her Nana Bill. Barbara always called her Nana Bill. The girls' friends called her Nana Bill. It was just and the same as my grandmother, Mum's mother, she was lived in Northcote, and the girls used to call her Nanny Nor, because they couldn't say Northcote, so they'd say Nanny Nor. And if she sent them a card, I found a card actually that she'd written to, I think it might have been Karen, and she said, love from Nanny Nor. So that was her name. So these things stick, I think, with kids. It's like with Andrew. When he was little, he couldn't say Andrew, he'd say Ardu. Well, Debbie did a course as a special needs teacher's aide. She's been doing that. Andrew's had a few goes at different businesses.
Very successful.
Yes, he can. He's very, very talented, Andrew. Anything in the arts or anything like that, and he's got some good ideas and he comes up with some good ideas. And he is. Now he's into wedding videos, but unfortunately with the virus, there's not many weddings. So he's doing videos on old people, me included, writing my life story, telling my life story, which I think it'd go really, not mine, but I think the whole concept will probably go really good. Well, Karen and Julio, we love both of them very much, and they're hard workers, both of them. They've had a few moves, and I'd just like for them to have a bit of good luck. But they're very good people, and they'll do anything for you. He's a plasterer, but he's quite handy with any handiwork, with any building work. And he's a mad golfer. And Karen's working for her brother Andrew and Alicia. She's been doing a bit of work there. She's always been a hard worker. She's had a lot of, she had manager positions, but sometimes I think all the pressure gets a bit much. So she's doing that. Andrew and Alicia, we love them both very much. They're both into the business, so they're very busy. They're always on the phone. Well, first off, we've got Sarah. She was our first grandchild, and we were very, very excited to see her. And she was a beautiful little girl, and she still is. Don't mean that. She was a lovely little girl. And she was mad on animals, any sort of animals, and she loved her netball. We used to go and see her play netball. But animals, she loved. We always thought she'd be a vet because she was just so into animals. But she's a good girl, and now she's got Adam. She seems settled with Adam, so that's all. We only wish for happiness for all of them. That's all we want. Christy, little Twisty, she's always been tiny. I remember one time I minded her for Debbie. I don't know why I didn't mind Sarah, did I? I might have had Sarah. And Christy had a bit of hair in her eye, so I thought, I'll just cut that. And then I unevened it, and I thought, I'll just cut a bit more off to even it up. And in the finish, when Debbie and Andrew came home, here's Christy with a little bob haircut. And she said, "What have you done to her?" I didn't mean to do it. I thought she looked quite cute, actually. No, it wasn't a Judith haircut. It was nice. Christy's always been into netball too. She loves her animals, but not as much as Sarah. I'd say Sarah's more, varied. Although didn't Christy like moths? Mothy. Yeah. But I think Sarah a little bit more than Christy. But Christy's always she always used to, if you could buy Christy a present, it would be Houses for Sale book. She always liked them. Whenever I would go out with Kathy on a Friday and I'd see a new book out, I'd say, I'll take that home for Christy. And Kathy would say, "But what does she want?" I said, she loves them. She loves looking at the houses.
You went there when she got the school?
No, I missed it. No, I missed the school bus, yeah. But no, Christy was always little and tiny and a little pocket rocket. even with her netball. I'll never forget one day she threw the ball and then she ran and she actually caught her own throw. I couldn't believe it. Matthew was a boy, of course, so he was, he was special too. And him and Sarah were inseparable because there was only 6 months between them. But they'd fight over everything. They'd fight who'd get out the car first, who'd open the door first, anything. Sarah was a bit above Matthew, and Matthew would say, "Now let me go first. Let me go first, Sarah. I'm going first." Sarah would say, "Yes, yes." And then as soon as they get there, she'd bolt. And then Matthew would cry, "You told me I could go first." Oh, but Matthew's a good kid. I used to mind him a few mornings a week for Karen if I wasn't working while she was working. And I used to take her down to Mum's and then would come home. And then I'd put him down in our bed for a sleep. I'd make him a bottle of chocolate milk. And then he'd finish it. I'd be in the kitchen and he'd finish it. And then I'd hear him throw the bottle. And then he'd yell out, "More chocky milk, Nanny, more chocky milk." So I'd give him another one. He'd do the same thing. I thought, I better not give him any more. More chocky milk. And then Amanda came along. And then I didn't see a lot of Amanda when she was really tiny. I don't think Amanda liked us. When we went up to Queensland for a holiday in the, what was it? The Delilah. Early I booked that house, that unit Delilah, it was full of bed bugs or something. And I used to go in and read a story to Matthew and Amanda, and then Amanda started knowing me a bit better. So, I mean, she's a lovely girl too. Her and Christy are very much alike in looks. And her and Christy have kind of got on well because they were a bit closer in age, but all those 4 kids, Matthew, Sarah, Amanda and Matthew, they were very, very close for cousins. So, and then Layla and Rory came along, so there's a bit of a gap. So they're a bit like Andrew to the girls, when our Andrew was born to the girls. But they're really good kids. In this day and age, you can all be very proud of them because they are. There's a lot of kids around with a lot of problems, but so far you really haven't encountered any of that. So, and now we're up to Layla and Rory. Rory, they're both lovely kids. I thought Layla was going to be very strong-willed, but she's turned into a lovely, caring girl, sports-minded, very good at netball and all sports. And she's always been a good sister to her brother Rory. She always knew what he was doing. If he didn't know what he had to do for the day, he'd always say to Layla, "Where do I go today? What do I do today?" And he'd take notice of what Layla said. It's a bit different now. He's older. He does his own thing. And he's into sport. He's into basketball and footy, and he's really good and really loves it. And they're both lovely kids, like all our grandchildren. They're lovely, great, caring kids. We're very lucky. And now we've got looking forward to seeing how our little great-grandchildren, Ruby and Max, turn out. And we hope that we're here long enough to see them grow older. And now we're on to Ruby. We're on to the next generation. And little Ruby's going to be like her mum, I think. She's a little busybody into everything. And I just can't wait for Christy to have her next baby, a little boy, and see how Ruby reacts. She'll probably be running around telling him what to do. A bit like Sarah and Matthew, I think. Yeah, she'll be the boss. Yeah. So we're very lucky to have lived this long to have seen these next generations. So it's really good, and to be able to enjoy them, and for Christy to bring over the baby, it's lovely. So it's just unfortunate in this day and age with this virus, it stops a lot of stuff. So yeah, we're walking, Debbie and me and Karen and Matthew and Sarah. Matthew is only in the pusher, I think. And we're walking down Main Street, and Matthew wanted something, and he screamed. And Matthew had he'd opened his mouth that wide, and he had the loudest scream, and he wanted it, and Karen said no. Anyway, Matthew would scream. And Debbie and I were walking in front, and this old lady who walking behind, she kind of caught up with us, and she said, "Oh, I know what I'd do with him." And Karen heard her. We never said anything, and Karen heard her, and she said, "What would you do with him? What do you know? You know, you wouldn't have even had kids. You wouldn't know how to look after them." And she followed this woman, and this lady's trying to hurry up to get away from her. And Debbie and I were just laughing and saying, "Oh, Karen, come back." Anyway, she crossed over the highway at Mordialloc with the lights. The woman's trying to hurry, and Karen's after her, and she kept talking to her all the way. Oh, it was... Yeah, poor Matt. And another time when I was at Southend with Marge, Auntie Marge, we were upstairs. In those days, the food court was upstairs, and we were upstairs having a cup of coffee, and all of a sudden I could hear this noise and this screaming, kids screaming. And you could hear it, but you knew it wasn't upstairs. It was from downstairs or on the escalator. I said, "Oh, God." Marge said, "Listen to those kids." And then I listened and I said, "That's Sarah and Matthew." And she said, "Oh, it isn't. How do you know?" I said, "It is." Anyway, the next thing, Debbie and Karen and Sarah and Matthew come up the escalator, and they're screaming. They wanted something and they were screaming. I said, "I told you." Yeah, so... Well, we've tried to do something right. You don't always know if you're doing the right thing, but you try and do the right thing and just love them and be there to support them if you can. Unfortunately, financially, we've never been able to do that, but we hope that we're there if we want them to know that we're there if they need anything, and just talk it over. If we can help, we will. And to just be there for your kids like you are there for yours, and they'll be there for theirs. And I think it all goes back to that. Just be there for them. That's the main thing. And let them know how much you mean to them. They mean to you. So we've been very lucky. And I've been very lucky. I've had 3 great kids and 3 great in-laws, and I think we all get on well. We might have our little moments, but then everyone does. I've had 1 short happy marriage and 1 long happy marriage, so I've been very lucky. Now I might cry. Just to say that well, you're well loved by everyone in the family, everyone going back to your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents. And I'm sure your great-great-grandparents, they would all love you. And the family has always put that apart from anything else. I mean, everyone needs money. There's nothing to get away from that. You can't deny it. You need money to get by on, and you need money. But don't let money be your main thing. Let your love for your kids and your love for your family. And always try and have that close bond with your family. Because when it comes to punch, that's the most important. So